developers that are interested in building on top of Cosmos.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting a lot better at selling like how to actually get started on Cosmos and how to get people onto the platform.
Awesome.
So we should be seeing an uptake in like developer adoption at some point soon.
Cool.
Right. There we go. Okay, I think we're actually live. Perfect. There's no, oh no, 8 people are already watching. Great.
Turn that off.
Okay, so I'm going to jump through our agenda like at random intervals, pretty much. But I'll cue in when I want you to introduce something. Okay, yes. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is again our 4th developer chat, and it's just so that we can slowly explain to more and more people what we're actually doing at Cosmos and where we are with the project and the status updates. Yeah, and in general, it's just designed so that the community has more of an idea on where we stand at the moment. To get started, I quickly want to introduce the second hackathon we're running. So we ran Hack Adam, essentially for the rest of the world, but now we're running one specifically for China. It's the second hackathon we're hosting, and you can find all the event details here. Oh, by the way, if you have questions, just keep posting them, and we'll come back to them at random intervals during the talk, during the call. So the prices again are 20,000 and 6,000 and 4,000 for the fourth place. If you have an interesting idea to build on top of Cosmos, so to build your own Cosmos app, please just enter. By now, it's actually also getting a lot easier since you can leverage the Cosmos SDK, which should really get you going in terms of building small prototypes that build on top of Cosmos. Yeah. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, that was pretty much just my... Oh yeah, it will run for 1 month. And that's about it. It started 5 days ago, so you've still plenty of time left to build your own cool shit. If you have nothing else to do and want to hack on Cosmos, please enter. Now, Bucky, do you want to quickly introduce Tendermint Core 0.10.3?
Yeah, sure. So this is an exciting one. We just released it this morning. Long overdue feature request that basically everyone who's worked with Tendermint has asked for at one time or another, which is to be able to control the frequency of empty blocks. So now there are 2 additional configuration options which allow you to turn off empty blocks altogether, so that blocks will only be created when there are transactions around or when the application hash changes. So you'll find that if you run this now and you use the consensus.createEmptyBlocks equals false flag, then nothing will happen. You won't see blocks stream in until you send a transaction. And then with every time you send transactions, you'll get 2 blocks, one containing the transaction, and then the next one will be empty, but it's because the application hash for a set of transactions goes in the next block, and you may want to be able to publish a proof of it. So we need an additional block to sort of commit the proof that the application hash changed. There's also a parameter to set an interval, so that say you only want to create blocks if there are transactions, but you still want to have a block like every minute or every 2 minutes or something like that, then you can set that interval, and then you'll just wait for transactions. But if that timeout hits, then you'll just create an empty block. So that's out today. That's 0.10.3. You should download it, run it, report any bugs. It should work fine with pre-existing testnet or pre-existing networks and the networks we have up already. So we will be soon probably tearing down those Mercury and Hermes, the old Basecoin testnets. They're into like the millions of blocks now, and it takes forever to sync up. And we will restart them on 0.10.3 with this new feature, so that there will be far fewer blocks in the chain. We'll only create blocks if there are transactions, and maybe we'll make a block, you know, every few minutes or every 5 minutes or something like that, just to keep the thing ticking along. And then it should be much faster to sync up. And we will add some official bounties into that testnet. So there'll be a few Easter eggs, things you can go searching for, and it'll require either digging into Tendermint a little bit or digging into Basecoin a little bit to see what we're talking about. And there should be prizes in atoms for that. So to get people kind of motivated to start looking at this stuff more closely and playing with it and so on. So there should be an announcement about that sometime next week.
Cool. We'll also tear down the Venus, so the Ethermint testnet, and also relaunch that with 0.10.3.
Awesome.
So what are some of the, so what actually happens when, let's say you have constant transactions, will we then still end up producing a block every second?
Yeah, if there's a constant stream of transactions, like there's always something in the mempool, then it functions just like it used to, where basically you have this timeout commit parameter that sets the frequency of blocks. So right now the default is basically 1 second. So if the mempool always has transactions, you'll make a transaction roughly every second. We didn't really have to make any significant changes to the consensus or any data structures to do this. It's just a little bit of refactoring internally to wait until there are transactions around to enter like the next step of the consensus state machine. So as far as we know, there are no ramifications to this as far as weakening the chain or anything. You're still very welcome to make empty blocks. It's not like punishable to make an empty block or anything like that. So there's no like new assumptions. And because Tendermint doesn't make any really strong assumptions about time, we don't see any way that this would really cause an issue. Of course, we're going to be subjecting it to very significant testing moving forward. We've got the unit tests, obviously, in the latest release, but we'll be doing some serious network tests to make sure that everything holds up in practice. And we can report more on that when it happens.
Oh, yeah. Maybe do you want to talk a little bit more about Jepson and the testing we're doing?
Yeah,
the Tendermint consensus engine there?
For sure, yeah. So some of you may or may not be aware of Jepson, which is a distributed systems testing framework built by Kyle Kingsbury, who goes by Afir. You can check him out. He's brilliant. He's been writing these posts about distributed databases for a few years now, and he teaches a course on them. Jepson is basically this like state-of-the-art tool that when you release a new distributed database system, no one really considers it trustworthy until it's been through the Jepson ringer. And what Jepson does is it launches a cluster and it launches a bunch of clients and sends lots of concurrent requests to your cluster, and also can provide very fine-grained control over network partition. So it can do a lot of funky stuff where it partitions off the network in all kinds of various ways and tries to see if there's any data loss or if there's any kind of consistency failure, like a safety failure or a fork in blockchain language. And also, you know, if there's some kind of issue with liveness, maybe the cluster halts because of some crazy network edge case. So it's a really, really thorough empirical testing framework that really just pushes your cluster right up to its like networking edge cases. And so far, Tendermint has been doing amazing. I think Kyle has expressed a little bit of frustration with how difficult it has been to break our software. So that feels kind of good. Usually a lot of these databases give way pretty quickly, and he's been at it for a couple months now. So we've done a lot of the basic network partitioning tests, and those are all going pretty well. He's also been doing some Byzantine tests, explicitly Byzantine tests, which is actually new for him because none of the databases he's tested yet have actually been Byzantine fault tolerant. So now he's doing some tests where, you know, he replicates the private key of a validator onto multiple nodes. So it's like as if it was double signing, and then does that with some network partitions, and still there have been no issues so long as less than 1/3 of the voting power is Byzantine. And of course, he can easily find that if 1/3 or more is Byzantine, then we get forks like crazy. And you know, Tendermint currently panics out in that condition. So that's something we actually have to handle is, you know, what happens one day if or when 1/3 or more of the validator set decides to be malicious and to fork the chain, and we need some kind of graceful recovery mode. And that's something we have sort of spec'd out, but need to work on an implementation for. So the latest with Jepson is he's now working on validator set changes. So really, really pushing lots and lots of changes to the validator set, changes to their weights, adding nodes, removing nodes, and during all that, sending transactions and making sure no data is lost and that there are no forks or anything like that. And so far, all the bugs have been in the logic for handling those changes on the client side. So Tendermint has been holding up just fine, and it looks like everything has been everything's been worked out now, and Tendermint is showing excellent results, just churning through lots and lots of validator sets changes without any lost data or any forks or any liveness bugs, as far as we can tell. So there are a few potential performance things we need to look into under these extreme conditions. But other than that, I think things are looking really good, and hopefully Kyle will do a write-up sometime in the next few weeks or in the next month or so, and then all this analysis will be public, and you can check it out yourself and run the tests yourself.
Very cool. To your knowledge, have any other blockchains been through this test?
No, not to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure we're the first. As far as I know, we're the first Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus algorithm that Jepson has tested. So hopefully we'll set the bar for that.
Okay,
there's a question here: should intentional forks even be prevented, or can they be totally prevented? No, I mean, no consensus system can prevent forks outright if some majority of the participants want to fork it, right? So most of these systems have a built-in threshold. So in synchronous systems like Bitcoin, or in non-Byzantine fault-tolerant systems like Raft or Paxos, that threshold is 50%. That's why you're always hearing about the 51% attack. But in asynchronous systems, or in synchronous economic systems like Bitcoin, it turns out, where there are asynchrony attacks like selfish mining, then the threshold is really more like 33% or a third. So if more than a third of the validators in Tendermint conspire to be malicious or colluding, then they can fork the blockchain. But there's nothing we can do about that, except the nice thing about Tendermint is that it guarantees we can hold them accountable. So if a third or more cause a fork, we know exactly which public keys were responsible for that fork, and so the community can coordinate via external media and start a new blockchain without those validators. And so we're working on a specification and ultimately an implementation for that as well.
Cool. What would happen? So Bitcoin is also susceptible to essentially a 33% attack. Was that what you said?
Yeah, technically. So that's what Emin Gunsur and his colleague showed a few years ago in the selfish mining, where basically a big mining pool can hold back its blocks until it's found a few in a row and then release them. And so even with less than 51%, they can come to take over the network. And so what's interesting there is that holding back the blocks is kind of akin to asynchrony, because it's as if they propagated the block, but it's taking a long time for everyone else to receive it. And so it's well known that in an asynchronous network, a Byzantine fault-tolerant system can only tolerate up to a third of malicious faults. So Bitcoin relies on a strong synchrony assumption to work, namely that the time to propagate a block is much, much less than the time to find a block. And so if miners are purposely holding back blocks and delaying their propagation, then it kind of violates that assumption and brings Bitcoin back to the standard kind of asynchronous network framework.
Right. By the way, should we ever expect to see these kind of attacks like on a production network?
In Bitcoin?
No, in Tendermint or Cosmos.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we have this built-in we have this built-in punishment, so that if less than a third try to double sign, they try to get some funny business, they'll get slashed and they'll lose their deposit. So it's almost like just by having that punishment built in there, it should thwart any attempt. Maybe people will think, oh, there's a bug in the code. Hopefully there isn't. And obviously we'll do extensive testing to make sure of that. But so I don't think we'll see people with less than a third of the validator power try to do this. Again, unless there's some kind of DOS attack or some bug in the code that makes it, for whatever reason, profitable for them. But for a third or more, I think, yeah, there's a reasonable probability that we'll see something like that happen. And, that's something we're going to have to deal with as a community and, use Tendermint's accountability properties to find out who those malicious validators are and start a new network without them.
Okay.
There's another question here. Does it mean Ethereum is much more susceptible to this attack? Yeah, I think it might be. Yeah, probably.
Well, technically, it'd be as susceptible as Bitcoin, right?
Well, the difference is, so Bitcoin has a strong synchrony assumption, but it's a weaker amount of time, right? It's like up to 10 minutes.
Right.
So Ethereum does this 12-second thing. The thing is, Ethereum hedges that a little bit with uncles. So I think the whole ghost mechanism allows you to relatively safely reduce that delta, that timing interval, so you can have, your synchrony assumption can be on a much shorter level. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about further. It's certainly susceptible. It's probably more susceptible than Bitcoin. There's all kinds of weird things going on in the uncle economics that I don't think are all that well understood. But they plan to move proof of stake anyway. So
yeah, eventually, right?
Yeah.
But the Ghost protocol you mentioned, that's essentially the one that is about including the uncles as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah, by the way, if you have questions on this, also just ask them right now. So we talked about this. Right, Tendermint core announcement. Cool. Oh yeah, maybe one more announcement actually from my side. We're moving everything towards Rocket Chat. So in the past month, we've seen a lot of attacks in terms of phishing on our Slack channel. That's also why we've disabled the public sign up. We have now Rocket Chat up and running, and we're moving everyone over to Rocket Chat. So our entire public communication channel will move over to Rocket Chat. If you haven't signed up or haven't registered on Rocket Chat yet, please do so. We will also start moving users manually, probably this weekend, so that you don't actually have to recreate accounts. So we'll import all the users from Slack into Rocket Chat. Yeah. Maybe also let's now talk a little bit about the timeline to get like production ready testnets up and running.
Yeah.
So when do you think we'll be able to actually host something that's close to the, let's say, Ethereum test network?
I think in September, late September, maybe early October. So as some of you may know, the framework previously called Basecoin has been undergoing a major refactor to make it much more modular. The idea there is it's mirroring the kind of structure we see in HTTP framework. So if you ever imported like an HTTP library and you have all this middleware that you can kind of piece together to figure out how a HTTP request is going to get processed and what it's going to jump through. We're building the same kind of framework for cryptocurrencies. So you basically have all this middleware that determines how a transaction is going to get processed, what kind of signature checks are going to go in there, what kind of replay protection, what kind of fees are going to get paid, and ultimately what kind of processing is going to get done, whether it's a virtual machine or just a simple kind of account balance transfer or something like this. So that was called Basecoin. It's undergoing this massive refactor that should be ready towards the end of the month or in early September, I think. And we're actually renaming that to the Cosmos SDK, because this is basically the software development kit or environment that we're building for making applications, at least in Go. So maybe we'll see another implementation in another programming language. But in the meantime, this will have all the pieces you'll need to build a cryptocurrency application that can easily plug into Cosmos using the inter-blockchain communication. It'll have fees and all that kind of stuff built in. So that'll be moving to the github.com/cosmos/SDK, I believe. And so once that is ready, it's sort of in parallel with that, we're building a few modules that we're going to need for the Cosmos Hub, namely staking and governance are the two big ones. And so staking is well underway. It needs some review and a little more work and a little bit of testing in advance. But also the governance one needs a bit of work as well. And so it probably won't be until the end of September that we have those modules in a state that we're really ready to start harking on them in a big public test net. So you can expect that then. I think as far as launch of the Cosmos Hub, I mean, you know, I'm a software developer speculating on when my software is going to be out. So, but I think we're probably looking at late November, early December, or something like this. If you know, we want to get this thing up and running. Certainly, what we're trying to do is kind of reduce the number of features we need in the initial launch, so we can launch with something at least and get people using this thing and ironing out any bugs in a simpler release, and then activating any of the other things we need. So if there are more complex pieces of governance, for instance, that are going to take more time to test before we're really confident, but all the other pieces are kind of ready to go, then perhaps we will launch without some of those pieces activated right away, just to give more time for testing or something like this. So we're still working out the exact release specifications, but I believe we're still on target for to launch before the end of the year.
Cool. By the way, did we ever describe the Gaia launch process in our white paper?
Well, we talked about the delegation game, and so there was this idea that, you know, before we started up the Cosmos Hub, we're going to start up another production network on which we'll play the delegation game. And so that delegation game is basically where all the atom holders can vote on who the validator should be by delegating their stake. Now, to kind of simplify things and prevent, you know, additional delays from having to put up, you know, additional production networks and so on, I think what we're looking to do is consolidate all of that into one thing. So the delegation game is just going to be basically the ongoing continuous process by which atom holders elect the validator set, and it'll start right away on day one. The initial validator set will be, we need to figure out a good process for this. It'll be somewhat handpicked, somewhat community informed. It will be relatively small. We're certainly not going to, I can almost imagine we're not going to launch with 100 validators right off the bat, but we'll be reaching out to members of the community that we know are atom holders or trusted, you know, identifiable individuals to participate in this, to be one of these initial validators. And then once the hub launches with this initial validator set, the delegation game will kick in right away, and then all the atom holders will have their vote on, you know, if any of those validators should be removed, if their stake should be increased by a delegation, what other validators should be added, and so on. So we'll make sure that we are less than a third of that initial validator set. So this will still be, you know, a decentralized community launch event, but at least we can simplify what we have to do to get this thing up, to make sure, to try to make sure that we launch before the end of the year. So if you have any input on that, please let us know on the Rocket Chat. If you are a large atom holder and you want to be involved in this initial validator set, also please let us know. Some of you will probably be reaching out to in the coming weeks about this.
Cool. Also, an important point on this is that initially coin transfers will actually be disabled. So initially you can only delegate atoms to increase someone's validator stake, but you can't actually do economic transfers of your atoms to someone else. So it's very, you can very much think about it like the initial Ethereum launch, where for the first like 4 weeks, I think, it was disabled to just test everything. And for us, it will be that once we reach a critical mass, which we define, will actually then enable the full functionality of the network.
Yeah.
Right.
So the hub will launch, but the tokens won't be tradable right away, because there'll be this thaw period in which, you know, we want to make sure the consensus is sound and the delegation is happening, and things get a little more decentralized across the atom holders before we enable exchanges of value. So hopefully you're willing to bear with us on this, you know, exciting journey as we iron out all these kinks and work towards launching this thing. And obviously Ethereum did the same thing. They launched and you couldn't move your tokens for a while because they had this like super low gas limit that basically forbade transactions from happening. So we'll do something similar. This question here, is there a specific branch for the refactor under Basecoin? Yeah, it's the unstable branch. So if you take a look there, I can just post the link.
I got it.
You got it?
There you go.
Unstable. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to check it out, just go there and read through the code.
Yeah, it's really nice, and we'd love more feedback from the community if anyone wants to try building something with it or taking a look. We've been going through a bit of a naming crisis, and so at one point we were going to call it Quark, and then we were going to call it Weave, and then we went back to Basecoin, and finally we settled on SDK. So because that's what it is, and that should illustrate better for everyone what we've built here.
So if you're watching any of the videos from last week from Shanghai, I still called it Weave. So that changed like 2 days ago. So it's now Cosmos SDK, but I think we're sticking to it.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so if there are problems with Rocket Chat, please let us know. So far, it's the best alternative we found to Slack. So I think we're going to stick with it. But yeah, if you have problems with it, just let us know and we'll tell Rocket Chat support as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so currently you might have started noticing that we're ramping up the amount of developer-focused material that we're releasing. Let that be the meetups, the talks, meetups that we're hosting, or the improved documentation. We're actually launching something called Cosmos Academy, which is very much focused on developer onboarding. So like, how do you get started with Cosmos? What are good introductory resources to get you as a developer to like work with Cosmos? So we should start having YouTube tutorials and more detailed blog post tutorials by the beginning of next month. So beginning of September, we should have more and more material coming out that explains not only how to build on like how the Tendermint engine works, but also how do you build your own Cosmos app? How do you connect to the Cosmos Hub? The app actually work? What are some important features that you have to keep in mind? Also, we will start doing the same thing for Ethermint. So how do you get Ethermint up and running? How do you deploy your first smart contract on Ethermint? And what are some of the cool use cases that this high transaction throughput actually enables you to do? If you have input on like some of the materials you'd like to see, please just let us know on Rocket Chat as well, or over email or something. We're always looking for input on that front. Right, yeah. So that's pretty much it. Cosmos Academy will be up and running by the 1st of September, most likely. And it should really get you guys going in terms of like onboarding new people onto Cosmos. We talked about testnets. Perfect. Bucky, did you have a chance to read the Plasma.io white paper? Because I haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
Yeah, so there's lots of questions here. I figured let's finish up whatever's on the agenda, and then we'll get to questions. We can start with Plasma stuff. Is there anything else there?
Cool. There is, yeah, so maybe just a quick thing. Our plan to launch a Cosmos Hub, because I got the question a lot in Shanghai. What are the features that are going to be included when we launch the Cosmos Hub? Maybe you want to take that, Bucky.
What are the features?
Yeah, so what are we launching when we're launching the live network?
Right. So as we were just saying, basically the only thing you'll be able to do at the beginning is propose yourself as a validator and then delegate to different validators. So it'll effectively just be the delegation game at first. Once we're happy with the participation and that is stable and working and the validator set has expanded, then the community or there'll be some process for enabling. It might be time-based, or it might be some kind of voting-based activation of actually the other basic functionality, like the SendTX mechanism, so that people can actually start moving their transactions around and trading if that's what they want to do. And then shortly thereafter, we'll have full featured governance, so that we can start enabling upgrades or parameter changes or whatever needs to happen there. And the IBC will also kick in, so that zones will be able to start being attached. So probably we won't see zones being attached until early 2018. And of course, there's the Ethermint zones that we'll be working on, but any zones will have to, they'll pay some kind of fee to get added, or depending on there's a bunch of different possibilities for what zones are able to do. In the white paper, we're really only focused on coin transfers. And so for coin transfers, it's simple enough where a new zone can show up and register on the hub and then be able to do IBC to move coins back and forth. and will be, you know, that'll be supported fairly early on. There will be some process for creating new coins on the hub, and then so that you can move them onto these zones and back. And then there'll be a process for having zones that actually act as the source of a new kind of currency. And then that'll allow us to do the actual peg zone system where we can peg to Ethereum, have real Ether move into that zone, and then float onto the Cosmos hub. And the hub will be okay with it. It won't be like, oh, this Ether's coming out of nowhere, because that zone will have permission to be the source, say, of this Cosmos Ether currency. So that's really the focus, getting all that kind of stuff working so that we can have these peg zones, and then people can peg to other public cryptocurrencies as well if they want to build out the infrastructure for that. But our focus is going to be on working with the Ethereum community and the Ethereum network, and, you know, any help we can get on that from the community would be appreciated as well.
Yep. Cool. Right, we covered this. And then, yeah, the last point is really some of the upcoming events that you can meet the Cosmos people at. So most of us are going to DEF CON 3 in Mexico. So if you're at DEF CON, come talk to us about Cosmos. We're always very excited to talk about Cosmos. Also, there is the Global Blockchain Summit coming up in Shanghai in the middle of September. So we're also there. If you're around, also come talk to us at the conference. And then there's also a conference in Berkeley whose name I forgot. Bucky, do you remember the name?
This is like the CESC or something?
Yeah, possibly. So there is also a conference happening in Berkeley, which we'll be at as well. And these should be the 3 events coming.
It's called the Crypto Economics and Security Conference, October 2nd to 3rd. So I think Jay will be talking at that.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it for our agenda.
Cool.
Do you have any other points to talk about, Bucky?
Not off the top of my head. I guess one thing is on the UI front. So with the simplification in the release plan, we're simplifying some of the UI stuff and consolidating. So right now things are kind of spread out across a bunch of repos. We'll be pulling them all back together into one repo that'll be github.com/cosmos/cosmos UI. So if you want to check that out, you should be able to run that app actually on a local testnet, and soon we'll enable it to be hooked up to the public testnet, so you can try out some of the functionality there. But we still need to iron out some of the kinks, but we have a few guys working quite diligently on that, so we're excited, and it's looking really good. Otherwise, yeah, I guess let's just get into general questions. So everyone's asking about Plasma. Plasma's cool. You know, I saw it show up kind of late last night before I was going to sleep, so I took a brief look. I haven't read the whole white paper yet. My first reaction was, geez, did they really need 47 pages to write this thing up? Probably not, but it looks kind of cool. It seems like a somewhat formalization of ideas that have been floating around for a while. It is very similar to Cosmos in some respects, but it seems like they're also building in this sort of state channel-like functionality as part of the mechanism for moving coins, with a focus on being able to get people out of like side chains, out of these zones, because basically they have this tree of zones, which Cosmos will enable too, right? It won't just be like one layer of zones. The zones themselves can act as hubs for more zones, and so on all the way down. What it seems like Plasma is focusing on is this idea of exiting, so that if you're on one of these lower down zones and the zone immediately above you is malicious in some kind of way, specifically it's suffering from a block availability problem where validators are holding back blocks so you can't see them and you can't validate properly, then there's a way for you to exit out of that and get your coins right back onto the root chain without having to go back through your parent. And that's pretty interesting. I think that's something we can look into and potentially support. I mean, the thing is, the idea behind Cosmos is to build this thing up by layers, one piece at a time. And so we have this very, very general purpose, low-level communication mechanism, plus a couple of other protocols that are totally orthogonal. And so, so basically we have the Tendermint consensus, we have the ABCI for building apps in any language, and then the IBC, which is the inter-blockchain communication protocol. So those are our 3 basic building blocks that will enable us to do this sidechain stuff, the sharding effectively. Then on top of that, you know, there's a whole world of possibilities, including the kinds of things that Plasma has proposed. So we'll look at, you know, what kinds of state channel mechanisms we can incorporate. I think there's lots and lots and lots of possibilities to incorporate other ideas in. We'll probably be looking into having payment channels as like a native feature in the Cosmos hub, so that we can, you know, we can have a lot more scalability on the hub directly, and things like that. So there's a lot of potential, a lot of features we can bring in, but we want to start simple and build this up one layer at a time and get the thing solid before we add too much additional complexity on top. But it's definitely something we're paying attention to.
Cool.
Ripple's ILP. Yeah. Ripple's ILP is cool. I think it basically is just trying to like formalize all the different ways of doing like atomic cross-chain transfers. And so as far as I know, you know, I don't know too much about the details. It's basically just a format for doing these atomic cross-chain transfers, or for doing, you know, payment channels across chains, basically, where you need both parties to be online, and you need you need both parties to be online, and it doesn't hold like authoritative state. So there's no like unidirectional, as far as I know, unidirectional flow of tokens from one chain to another, where the validators on the respective chains are holding like the authoritative state the way that side chains work. So it falls more in the camp of payment channels and state channels than it does into side chains and sharding. But again, it's something, you know, it's something we could support on top of our base layer. So we'll be looking at that too, and we're talking to some of the stakeholders in that format and protocol about how we can work together.
Yep.
So lots of potential.
Yeah. So the main takeaway really is we can build a lot of different cool features on top of the base layer once the base layer works.
Right.
Any other question, guys? I think that could actually be it for today. Good 40 minutes. Thank you, Bucky.
No problem.
And
thanks all for.
We'll have the next step chat in 2 weeks. Again, we'll have a lot of announcements about it. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see each other in 2 weeks again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.